Peter for that. And now we'll close the presentation with a presentation on common capability challenges identified across the different workshops. And Marta Miralles will present that. Marta is from the Catalan Fire Service, and as we mentioned before, she's also in charge of this Work Package 1, organizing all this cycle of workshop and raising the gaps.
So, good morning. We had the privilege of being in most of the workshops that you have seen, and listening about most of the scenario, and listening to a lot of experts, and doing. And you saw that we have been we have dealt with 10 different scenarios. 10 different scenarios, and having there people from very different nationalities, different profiles, and different expertise. So it was very rich workshops, as you have been seeing, but we started to see what were the experts focusing on. And one of our realizations was how much all the fire service experts that we had were focusing not only on the job during the incident command, but on all the job that has to be done previous to the incident. So how the knowledge cycle, understanding what is my doctrine, what is my standards and procedures, train based on them, exercise based on them, and then learn from these exercises to change the doctrine, learn from real cases and scenarios to change the doctrine and the procedure, and keep this knowledge cycle alive. Also, they talked a lot about what we call pre-planning. So establishing scenarios, learning and pre-planning with the communities and with the stakeholders, and what shall be done. We talked a lot also about community involvement, as you have been seeing. We talk a lot about, we talk a bit also about networking. And we also talked about technology, about information management, as you have seen, about standardization. But many of the, such a huge part of their worries were really about pre-planning and learning and to be ready for these incidents, because we chose very specific incidents that usually were not common incidents, that were exceeding the capacities of any fire service. So when they look for solutions, they didn't look for solutions in the intervention, but on the work to be done before. And that we thought was very interesting. When we were repeating workshops, one thing that we saw, as you maybe have seen during these presentations, is how many times they were repeating some of these, most of these concepts, and they were repeating them in one workshop after another workshop, people who didn't meet each other and people who hadn't seen each other. But we also saw that different scenarios gave different kinds of worrying, of what they were worried about, and how were they tackling every one of these capabilities that we've been working on. And so we built this concept of the challenges. And you have been seeing these challenges during the presentation, but what I want you to focus in is in the second line, on what is the bottleneck. One thing is when the bottleneck is resources and time. And this is you know, this is the basis of most of our operations in the fire service. This is where we are most of the time, and that is our focus when we look for organization and when we look for all those things, procedures, when we look for, because this is where we are most of the time. But also, we have been seeing that when you deal with scenarios that exceed your capacities, that is not a thing on how much resources can I put there, but the event is exceeding your capacities. They are usually events where you cannot acquire expertise. And now think on what the thematic working group leaders have been explaining, that Europe is so much fragmented, that the realities, you all know, the realities across Europe are so different. So that also means that we are not accumulating knowledge, because also the knowledge is fragmented. And the data of all these incidents is also fragmented. And so we are used to deal with emergencies based on what we learn from service to service. But there are some services that we don't get repetitions. And there is 1, 2, 3 fire officers that have gone through that. There are some firefighters that have gone through that. But this knowledge is not in the organization. Then we have this other scenario where we said multi-agency, but here we wrote multi-leadership because we wanted to focus on what is the problem. And the problem is not like in a traffic accident where I have 3 different agencies. The problem is where I have very different levels of decision-making that are done simultaneously in different parts of the emergency, and these very different decision-makings are done by different agencies and different expertise. So integrating this decision level is another of these bottlenecks. And the last one that we couldn't find many solutions to this one is when we deal with very uncertain scenarios. And we thought that this focusing on our weaknesses, because this mainly our weaknesses, was a good way to organize these common capabilities challenges. Also, that those types of challenges are linked one to the other. And this is an increasing level of complexity. And when the response is not more resources, you have a problem with these low-frequency, high-impact events. And when it's not enough with building capabilities, that your problem is decision-making, then you are in the next scenario. And that also means that you cannot give a response to these multi-agency scenarios without first building capacities. And you cannot deal with these high uncertainty scenarios without first building ways of making this integrated decision-making. So from there, we did this, big matrix. Sorry for this slide. I'll try to go, just look at me, not at the slide. So, but the thing is that if the main problem with the high flow of effort is sustaining operations, and that means that we need to build, that the knowledge we build is in roles and risks, that we pre-plan the response, we build procedures and guides. The information management is focused in have a good information cycle. And let me here point that one of the main things that also you have heard repeated here is that we don't need more data, we don't need more noise, we know there are simulators and we know there are drones and we know there is technology back there. The thing is that this technology has to be useful. and if it doesn't help in decision-making and in solving the incident, then it's only noise. And we don't need more noise. Believe me, we have a lot of noise to deal with. Also, for these low-frequency, high-impact scenarios, mainly we need to build capabilities within the organization. And that means that both most of firefighters have to know how to deal with that, that we need to have the capacity of organizations of building knowledge in experts, on building knowledge through networks of experts, in building knowledge through these interfaces with science and with the industry and with the... But mainly, we need to build capabilities and knowledge inside our own organizations. And if you don't first build this knowledge and have a good way of organizing and learning from experiences in other places, you will not be able to increase your interoperability or improve your distributed decision-making. So we went to the next scenario, this multi-leadership scenario, and as we said, here we focused on interoperability and on providing a shared understanding so the decision-making is good or well-oriented, yes? You have the strategic decision-making, the tactical decision-making, the operative decision-making, and all these have to be focused. But first, you need knowledge, because without knowledge, you won't be able to solve the emergency. You will be able to respond to the emergency. But responding and solving are two different things. And as I told you, we have very few things about this high level of uncertainty in the scenarios. Some talking about capacity building, about resilience, but not that much. So one of the things I wanted to emphasize is this idea that there are two lines in which, for each one of these challenges, we have to build around. One line is organization, of course, and capabilities in the organization, and coordinating decision-making. But the other line is knowledge. And really, the thing is that there is no who pays for this knowledge. That is one of the questions that the experts ask us. Who pays for the drills and the exercises? Who pays who invests on this knowledge? And you cannot, as I told, if you only go to the first line, you only get response. If you want to solve part of the emergencies, then you need to invest in the two lines and probably in a third line, which is community involvement and stakeholders involvement. And then within each one of these lines, then we have all that we have been hearing about, from these European guides to these ideas of lessons learned platforms, of policy making, of the process of learning lessons, because we all talk about learning lessons, but this is a process that we have to implement in our organization, and it's really difficult to do. We need, in the third of the scenarios, we need to invest in, for example, certification, because if we need to exchange experts, it's not enough that we build capabilities. We have to recognize the capabilities of the others and the limits of their competencies and our own limits in our competencies. And we need to learn to work in a world where our competencies are overlapped, and we need to learn to deal with that. So that is, I wanted to give a quick view of what the results of these common capability challenges dealt with. And I wanted to also pinpoint some of these sentences or thoughts that for me were important and we heard across the workshops. One is the word trust. I think we heard the word trust in the 10 scenarios.